Hi there and welcome to another Sophisticated Saturday YouTube episode. Guys, I'm very excited today because we have Amanda Jarvis Doyle joining us to talk about one of her transactions. Now, Amanda, if you don't know her, is a master franchise area owner. So she, jointly with Pauline Chalmers, looks after all of the franchisees in England and Wales. She owns the rights to those two countries. She has been a phenomenal franchisee. She's been on board for just over 5 years now. And in today's episode, she's going to be explaining to you about a vendor and a property that you are going to solve. So she's going to explain the situation, she's going to explain the vendor's property problem, and then she's going to explain to you how she really monetized it in real life, how much she made and how it worked. Guys, I hope you enjoy this episode.
Hi, I'm Amanda Jarvis Doyle and I run EPP England and Wales with my business partner Pauline Chalmers. My main concern when I started my property business was that I didn't have a huge pot of cash. I had around £20,000 in the bank and my goal was ultimately to help my husband retire. He's a little bit older than I am. And so how was I going to develop my property business and invest in property without having more than £20,000 in the bank? I quickly realised that I needed to generate more cash in order to develop my property investment quicker. I came across EPP and a system that enabled me to generate 4 times my income that I'd been having as a civil servant working for DWP. In my first 3 years on EPP, I probably did 3 transactions a year. But each of those earned me between £25,000 and £30,000 each. And that's remarkable. If you think about investing in property, typically you're leaving your cash in and it would take you years and years and years to get that money out. The way that I learnt from EPP to get my cash out in a creative way was actually to not buy the properties myself. I have built myself a portfolio, but it was to sell those purchases on to investors who didn't have the experience of investing in property, didn't want to make a mistake, or didn't have time to go out and find a property themselves and invest in it without making costly or personal choices. A lot of novice investors buy with emotion. And we look at the figures, we don't look at what you and I might want to live in as a property. We're looking at, does it give a good return? Can I give my investor a good guarantee on what they are going to be earning for their property? The way that we do that is we are finding motivated vendors, or I find motivated vendors from leaflet delivery. So I'm going directly to them. I'm not going to an estate agent. I'm going to an auction. I go directly to the vendors. I find those vendors who are motivated and work with them to find a solution for their situation. That situation then typically means that they either don't want to go on the market for one reason or another, or they need a quick sale, they need a certain sale. And the guarantee that I give them is that I will find a way to buy their property. If it isn't going to be on the open market, then we can actually find that solution for them. So I find the property. I then have an investor that is waiting. They've paid me a deposit to go and source a property for them. And I didn't think that I knew people who had money, because people don't walk around, do they, with a label on their forehead saying, I've got £30,000 in the bank and I want to invest it in property. So you have to start those conversations. And sometimes it's not easy to start those conversations. But you actually find that more people than you are aware have cash that is lying around in the bank that is earning next to nothing for them. And if you're offering them a minimum 8% return on their cash invested, then they would be delighted to know how you can help them with that. So in this scenario, I'm helping not only the vendor who wants to sell their house, but I'm also helping the investor. And the benefit of that is it's a 3-way win. So it's a win for the vendor, it's a win for the investor, but it's also a win for me. I'm making a really great return on a property that I would alternatively have made good cash flow from over time, and probably not left much of my own money in, if at all, but I'm making a good chunk of money that brings me cash flow into my business. I started with 2 or 3 properties a year. Last year I did 10 of these transactions. It generated me £250,000 cash flow into my business. And I started 5 years ago. I've not been doing this for years. I've not been doing it forever. It's something that I've learned. It's a process, and I follow the system. So what I'm trying to say to you is, you don't need a huge pot of money to get going with this as an option to start your property business. An example of one that I've done recently is the property. I'm in Derbyshire, so central England, so the property prices are relatively low in comparison to London. So a 3-bedroomed end terrace property, and it was valued at £122,000 by the bank. I negotiated a purchase price with the vendor of £78,000. Now that was because the property needed a considerable amount of work. The investor paid the £122,000. So I made the difference between the 122 and the 78. So that's £44,000. That enabled me to do a comprehensive refurbishment and still take £32,000 out into my back pocket. When we talk about win-win solutions, this is a three-way win. So the vendor wins, they've found a solution to their property problem. In this scenario, it was actually an inherited property that was just really getting her down. It was empty, she was paying bills on it, she was paying council tax, and she really didn't want people walking through her mother's house and tearing it apart because it needed a lot of work. She didn't want to have to constantly go back to bring up the memories of being in the property. She'd grown up in the property, so it's quite emotional for her to keep going back. So it was a win for her. It was a win for my investor because they only actually invested 5 hours of their time. They put their deposit in. I help them arrange the mortgage. I carry out the refurbishment, and I then tenant and manage that property for them. They have no concerns about dealing with compliance. All certifications dealt with, tenants are vetted and referenced without any concern to the landlord. They just sit at home and wait for their monthly amount to come into the bank. So it's a massive win. A 3-way win. What more can anybody ask for? As you can see, the win here is I'd done a property deal. I ended up with more money in my back pocket than I had when I started. So it's a really easy way of doing this on a rinse and repeat and building your cash pot ready for you to start investing yourself.